It's like you get a blood test, and the blood test shows you have low, let's say, testosterone for both men and women. That's a blood test. But if you really back up, the reason you have that low testosterone for both men or women is you don't get enough rest. So back to the nervous system, because if the nervous system's on, you're not making building and sex hormones, you're making survival hormones.
Right.
So that, again, back to, you mean that I don't need to take a hormone replacement? Well, maybe not the second. We need to get you to sleep more or get more rest or more stillness.
All right, well, welcome back to another Rest, Eat, Move podcast. Dad's back from his trip up north. Again, congratulations on the 41st wedding anniversary. Today we're going to talk about something we really kind of get into the weeds later into the books and presentations and the conversations around your body's always talking to you, which then leads into a little bit of body care and the things you put on your skin. But when you came up with kind of this slogan and we've worked it around and try to make it something that people can remember, your body's always talking. And you write, you need to listen. Or you could say, are you listening? Or do you know how to listen? Talk to the listeners about why this came about and where you see a lot of people suffering because they're not really paying attention to their body.
Well, for a long time, we've talked about the first step of behavior change is self-awareness. And unfortunately, in our world, as you mentioned, we're not taught about, how do you listen to your body? And what does that really even mean? And so if you looked at the human body itself, it has an amazing ability to cope and respond and heal and self-correct. But if you don't listen to it, you don't really know. If my knee's bothering me, why is my knee bothering me? If my cholesterol's out of balance, why is it out of balance? If I have acid reflux, why do I have to acid reflux? In reality, is or a headache or whatever it might be, but the body's telling you something's out of balance. And unfortunately, we try to get through it as fast as possible. So if I have a headache, you take ibuprofen or an anti-inflammatory. Or if I have acid reflux, I take a acid blocker or a proton pump inhibitor. So that's where it came up with is that, people are always like, hey, look, my blood work is great. We've talked a lot about Know Your Numbers, and if you're not familiar with that, we have a Know Your Numbers download, something you take to your doctor. And people get all really, interested in that when we talk about it. But when you talk about the other things, they have nothing to do with blood work.
Why? Well, let's stop right there. Why? Why is Know Your Numbers so? We pay doctors more for Know Your Numbers. We pay pharmaceutical companies for the things to Know Your Numbers. Why don't we have more emphasis on why your breath smells?
In fact, I had a woman call me yesterday about her breath, and then she sent us a text on that. But let's just step back for a second. Many people will pay thousands of dollars to go to, the best and the brightest hospitals to get their blood work and this and that. But in reality is...
Which is just a test, a diagnostic.
And it's essential. It's a great way. You can measure this and that. But I would bet that you're going to get much more impact of the body and the mind if you really learned how to listen. We've known, Weston Price talked about this, since the 30s and 40s about teeth and gums. So when the teeth and gums are Dr. Ed Peters, you talk about eye care. There's all these wonderful ways that the body's talking back to us. What's your sleep look like? If you got broken sleep,
why?
You got to ask the question, why is my blood pressure out of balance? Or why is my resting heart rate too high? These have nothing to do with a blood test.
My favorite is hair, skin, and nails. Because your skin is kind of a mirror of what's going on inside.
Well, skin's your largest organ. So when I was growing up, I had bad skin, psoriasis, eczema, gut health issues, and they just gave me stuff.
But can you kind of go into, for example, hair, skin, and nails is important for a lot of people. You've seen a lot of the topical stuffs and the creams and the expensive, things you're putting on your body, which we'll get into maybe in a second around body care. So they're still going after some symptomatic things versus the source of why the problem exists in the first place.
Well, I'll just back to use me as an example, but I had severe dandruff when I was in like junior high school.
So just get dandruff shampoo.
So dandruff shampoo. Or I had major skin problems. I had eczema and psoriasis, and so I was given cortisone creams and
Rub more creams on it.
And so it really broke through my skin, and my skin.
Which you're looking for relief. You need some relief.
Yeah, I want to be fixed. Help me, fix me. But reality is, why is my skin? Why is my hair? If you think about hair, what do they put in shampoo? They put in minerals. When you look at moisturizers, they put in moisturizers. So they put in some type of water. So if you just step back, I remember I had a client way back in the day. Joan Carpenter, and she was in her mid-80s. In fact, I remember playing golf with her in her late 80s, and one day she comes in, and she was a dancer, and I just loved her, and she was very quiet. She comes in, and she says, "Honey," she called me honey, are my nails supposed to grow faster? Because my nails have never grown so fast. And she says, I now have moons on my finger, and I've never had those before. She says, what's that from? I said, well, Joan, we've changed a lot of what you're eating, omega-3 fats. We're talking about this and that. And it really hit her that her nails are growing more. She's got more beautiful nails. But most people, when you look at that, you think about this sometimes when you go to a health club and you see the men in the locker room and you look at their feet, you're like, oh my gosh, it's just ugly. But reality is that that's talking back. Skin is the largest organ. It's a great mirror. Your hair, when I see people and they have vibrant hair or their skin's vibrant or their eyes or whatever, you know right away they're healthy. And you don't even have to look at their blood work. Blood works are probably going to be very. So that's really the gist behind the body's talking back.
Yeah, I love the two parts. So your body's always talking to you. So number one is accepting that we are going to have cues and clues before the scale. I mean, the scale is maybe a cue that you can see, but I don't know, in your work, in my work, it's usually the last symptom that starts to get haywire if we don't listen to these other things first. But yet it's the first thing that we wake up and say, well, I got to lose some weight in 2024. Well, your eyes are a mess. Your breath doesn't smell very good. Your skin's been dry. You've had poor digestion. Why aren't you paying attention to these things?
Because we're not taught.
And so let's teach them some of the ways that you can listen, or the ways that your body is trying to talk back. So I talk about eyes, teeth and gums, breath, sleep, digestion, elimination, energy. We talked about energy last podcast. Muscles, tendons, ligaments, bones, skin, hair, nails, body weight.
I think, again, just to let the listeners and viewers know that breath is going to be one of the future diagnostics.
I think it already is. Yeah.
And so when you look at blood tests, again, it's the gold standard, but breath is going to have over 80 diagnostics coming up.
And why is that?
Because the breath tells you everything. And because
it's a gateway to your gut.
It's a gateway to the gut. So I had talked to this woman yesterday, Mary, and I was telling Mary, your breath is directly related to your gut. You can take a mouthwash and it's going to make you, short term, but it's always coming from the gut. We've all been this before. When people get sick and they belch, you know right away they're sick. So
it's interesting to say about the mouthwash. There's actually a lot of new literature around how the mouthwash changes your gut microbiome in a negative way.
Yeah, in a negative way, because again, digestion begins in the mouth. And so if you're killing all the digestive enzymes in the mouth, you're not helping the gut break foods down. So again, that's why we're such fans of water with lemon and apples
chewing your food, not taking a probiotic from a supplement.
Not taking a probiotic and not taking acid blockers and things like that, because now you're creating this, the garden is now in the gut is now getting upset. So anytime, I remember growing up in our house, we had kaopectate. We lived on it. But nobody ever said it, like, this is not normal that you have kaopectate for, diarrhea or, constipation or whatever it is. So it's, we talk a lot about the bowls. I'm going to kind of jump around here for a second, but, the bowls is really a great indicator of if your body's eliminated correctly. Your bowel movement, your urine, your lymph, your lungs, your skin. And if all those superhighways are open, you're going to have great elimination. You're probably going to have better skin. You're going to have better hair. You're going to have better everything. But again, we're not listening. So in our house, we weren't listening. Everybody in our family's got diarrhea. Well, hello, we need to have some wake-up call that maybe that's not correct. So that's what we're talking about this today.
What you're saying kind of triggered something. So I was in the office here last week, and a gentleman came in. He was trying to sell some internet or something like that. And he came in. He's very, energetic and had a good personality. And what do you do? And so I told him, and he was halfway out the door, came back in and said, well, what do you think about this? And I told him, and halfway out the door, and he said, hey, I got this problem. I've had really bad digestion for the last 4 or 5 years. So like he's out the door, in the door, out the door, into the door. He didn't know what we did at all. And then next thing you know, you have all this pain. And when you look at him, you wouldn't probably guess that was his thing, but he's aware of it. But how long did it take him to become aware of it is what I was thinking. And then he wanted a solution in this half out the door, half in the door, like take this thing and you'll be. And when my response, and I think you'd respond the same way, I don't think he knew that my response could even be what I said. What do you think I said?
Well, I'd say you got to get your gut healthy, but you got to do it slowly.
I said, are you a nervous guy? Are you stressed out?
Yeah, your nervous system's out of balance.
And he said, yeah, I took this new job and I haven't been this right since.
Yeah.
And, that's the complexity, but also the simplicity of what we're talking about. I mean, it's pretty simple, but when you make it so overwhelming, like, well, what's the gut have to do with my sleep? Or what's my eyes have to do with my skin? You don't need to know the X's and O's. You don't need to know where they connect and the origins and all those things. What you need to know is they're connected.
They're connected.
And he knows he's got stress. He knows he's got bad digestion. And what we're trying to do today is allow you to listen, because you can connect that on your own. And I said, one of the biggest problems that I see is digestion is at its all-time worst. Immune system's at its all-time lowest level in, I would say, human existence, or at least in the United States. And we've never been more stressed. And what does that have to do with it? I mean, the science of stress, if you look at the science, it's right there in front of us. Sympathetic, fight or flight, that's what we're all in, alarm. And then you got parasympathetic, rest and digest. It says it right there. You cannot have a good digestion unless you have relaxation, which I think everyone realizes when you're stressed, you're not relaxed. So he left with a book, and I think he was pretty excited because he's been trying to Band-Aid this thing for probably 5 years, taking these things and going to the doctor and doing another scope and like, is there a tumor? Like, that's where we go versus stepping back and saying, I'm super stressed. I got a new job I don't really like, or I got a lot going on, and this is getting worse and worse and worse.
Well, and again, you don't want to make this so difficult, but that's why we always start with rest and then eat.
I know.
And then move. And the reason we're starting with rest is just you mentioned, if the nervous system's out of balance, that the sympathetic nervous system is on too much or the parasympathetic nervous system's on too much. We talk about this all the time. I mean, the fastest way to help people change their emotion is to get them to move. So, but part of that is we have to just understand it real basic, that your nervous system needs to be relatively in balance to have good digestion. So what that leads to, like, for example, we'll talk about sleep. So sleep would be your body's talking back to you, not sleeping. Well, before I'm going to talk to people about actually the science of sleep, we're going to talk a little bit about the nervous system, because in the nervous system is where your hormones are made. It's like serotonin, neurotransmitter, and serotonin makes melatonin, and you can see how it starts to roll. There's a light bulb goes on when we start talking about that. They're like, I never knew my gut controlled my sleep. Well, all you're doing is telling me you're not sleeping. I'm stepping back for a second and saying, okay, why is this person not sleeping?
And I think that's part of modern medicine that is so good, is the isolated specialty can go deep when deep is needed. But what we're talking about at the surface level, when your skin starts to go bad, because it normally didn't start bad, or when your breath starts to get dry or doesn't smell right, or you're having these like pains in your gut, it usually, and some people it did, some people were dealt a bad hand, but usually it didn't start that way. And so when we don't pay attention and keep doing the same thing repetitive, and now you're to the point where you're asking a doctor whose expertise is going down into the roots, and you haven't even paid attention to the bark and outside of the tree.
You know, we'll talk sometimes like you get a blood test, and the blood test shows you have low, let's say, testosterone for both men and women. That's a blood test. But if you really back up, the reason you have that low testosterone for both men and women is you don't get enough rest. So back to the nervous system, because if the nervous system's on, you're not making building and sex hormones, you're making survival hormones.
Right.
So that, again, back to, you mean that I don't need to take a hormone replacement? Well, maybe not the second. We need to get you to sleep more or get more rest or more stillness.
If you want to, again, respond to the body, are you gonna look for the answer? Your body's always talking to you.
And you mentioned earlier, I was telling this group this morning I was speaking to, walk down the digestive aisle in any grocery store today. They don't have these things in there if they're not selling. And so if I have acid indigestion, you don't take Tums or you don't take Prilosec or you don't take, because as soon as you do that, but people want to get that instant fix.
I think the digestive aisle is the most interesting thing because it can't be more on point to your body is talking to you. Mm-hmm. I have diarrhea. I have constipation.
Right.
I have acid reflux.
Right.
I have an ulcer. It just goes on and on and on. Again, that's your body. It's screaming the same way, like,
or anti-inflammatories.
There's a doctor that I follow that really specializes in anxiety, and his whole thing is anxiety is your body telling you something's wrong.
Correct.
You're not the issue isn't anxiety. The issue is what your body's trying to speak to you about. Mm-hmm. Like, is there danger? Are you not doing something here? Like, and that's that's your mental, your body's kind of a weird word because we do mean your mind and body.
Yeah, we're talking all one.
So things,
mind, body, talking.
It's so sophisticated and elegant and magical, but when we're just so, I would say, unattuned or haven't been taught, we miss this opportunity to take what it's actually showing.
If you went to Carnegie Hall and you were sitting in the audience and listening to this most amazing orchestra, and all of a sudden the tuba player decides he's going to take a nap, or the violinist, or whatever, now you've lost the complete harmony of the whole thing, and that's the human body. The body will do whatever it can, but eventually over time, something's going to fall apart.
The rest of the band will take over.
The band will take over.
And then the next person's out.
Yeah, the next person's out, and the next person's out, and the next thing you know, you don't really have that amazing. That's why you went to Carnegie Hall. So I think that's sometimes we just keep masking and masking and masking. My knee bothers me. Okay. I'm just going to take some kind of, anti-inflammatory that masks.
Well, it's just I'm getting old. I mean, it's going to happen.
I can't do that anymore. Reality is you might have lost the mobility. You create the synergy in the body and the strength there. And so it's always interesting. It's like a private investigator. When you have something that's a little bit out of balance, just stop yourself in your tracks and just say, why is my cholesterol out of balance? Why is my blood pressure creeping up? We know, we've talked about this 100 times. It's almost impossible to have high blood pressure if you know how to quiet the mind and relax the body. And that's basically through our breath. So, but if you have high blood pressure, you're going to go in and your blood pressure is high. You're probably going to get a calcium channel blocker, an angiotensin drug, or possibly a beta blocker. And the reality is we need to learn how to balance the nervous system. So again, we're not saying it's anybody's fault. But as Justin Grinnell said the other day, it can be your responsibility, and then you start seeking out, how do you get people to help you with some of these challenges?
I love this topic. Let's move from this topic because I think the point's made. Your body is always talking to you. Do what you can to try to listen. And if you don't know where to start, again, we write about it, we talk about it, reach out to us. We'd happy to kind of take it further. But someone told me long ago, and this I think is not new advice, but the answer always lies within us if we allow ourselves to find it. We don't need too many external people to tell us what's wrong or too many people to tell us, what you need to do right. It's there. Now, there's some skills and there's some knowledge that we need to acquire, but most of the time, it's trying to tell us that check engine light's on.
And I think one thing, because the check engine light is what we're talking about, but one last thing in this subject is you have to slow down to listen. And if you're not slowing down, you're not listening. It's almost impossible to listen. So that's the thing I try to do when I'm sitting down with a person individually is let's just stop for a second and let's start with some basics. But we got to listen first.
Yep, got to slow down. Okay, let's move into body care essentials. This is something that you're really passionate about, and it's not the first thing you normally speak about, but sometimes you can't help it because it is a big part of your health. What you put on your skin, we were just talking about skin's largest organ, it's going to go in the body. So where do you want the listener to start when we talk about body care essentials?
Well, I'm going to talk about my sister just for a second. So my sister Paula, she's a occupational therapist, just recently retired, naturopath, and she's taught me a lot in the whole body care product line. But she always really begins with think of your health as a bathtub. And we have this bathtub, and again, everybody has genetics. We all have that. But just imagine your bathtub being full. But then we slowly let the water out, and eventually we kind of lose the health. So your health is like thinking of a bathtub. And sometimes we don't think about how body care can really improve your health or decrease your health. And when you think about what goes on the skin, it goes in the body. And I never really thought about this. And as you mentioned just at the beginning, this is not a subject I talk about at the very beginning because you're going to lose the entire audience. You're like, what's this guy talking about? But step back today and say, could you bite into your soap and eat your soap and not get sick? If you looked at your toothpaste that says harmful or fatal if swallowed, probably don't want to put that toothpaste in my mouth. So that's kind of how we begin, is that those things that we use, body care products day in and day out, need to be back to the source. Where does it come from? And there's so many different options for you. We talk a lot about aluminum chlorohydrate. Never want to put aluminum chlorohydrate underneath the armpit because it blocks your lymph. And so when you think about deodorants, you're saying I shouldn't be using a deodorant. I didn't say that. You shouldn't use the antiperspirant. But when you pick a deodorant, you do not want aluminum chlorohydrate underneath the armpit. So that's how we begin. You begin with the things that you use the most every day, and you systematically swap them out. And we have a great handout called Brand Favorites. But all my clients, I swap out their soap, swap out their toothpaste, swap out their shampoo, what they put on their skin, whether it's oils or lotions or whatever. There's lots of great options out there.
It's interesting. We've talked about this maybe years ago on a podcast or through some of our work, but antiperspirant was created, I don't know, in the 20s or 30s. And at the time, any respectable doctor was like, this is the most harmful thing you could ever do, to stop the sweat. Stop the sweat, because you're sweating for a reason.
To eliminate.
Yeah, and if you block it, it's going to go somewhere else. So the toxicity that's trying to be released is going to go somewhere else. Well, they figured out a way to kind of market it a different way, and now it is the most common thing of, well, sure, just do an antiperspirant. You shouldn't have to sweat. And this is probably, to me, the one that I think everybody should do.
I agree.
But I understand that if you go 18, 20, 25, 35 years using antiperspirant and you go to a natural deodorant, it's not going to be a easy transition because your body is used to having this thing block your sweat. And once that floodgate opens back up, you may sweat more. It may have a smell that you're not comfortable with. It doesn't mean that the body is unhealthy, or it doesn't mean that the body, like, you're different than other people. It's like, it's talking back to us in a way that we should.
Well, again, you just hit it. One of the downsides, again, if you're going to say, let's do one change, I would start with your
I would
deodorant.
say that's number one.
Yeah, start with your deodorant. Don't change anything else. Just start with there. And there's so many options out there, and if one doesn't work well for you, try another one. But there's lots of options.
It's taken me a while, and I actually have to
rotate
rotate because
Mix it up.
I'm not sure we were meant to put deodorant under our armpit. You know, it creates a little bit of irritation,
and sometimes I've gone periods of time where I don't use it at all. But again, when you're around people and sometimes you're busy and
yeah,
you might be
culturally,
stressed
hygienically, yes, that's a problem. So,
but let's go back to this for a second. The big problem is they're called endocrine disruptors.
Sure.
And what an endocrine is your hormones, and now you disrupt them, and so that's the downside. That's the side effect. That's the problem. And so when you just said it, if I put this on my body, I'm disrupting my hormones.
And it's not cause and effect. Like if you put on antiperspirant, it's not going to cause X, but it's going to disrupt. And down the way, down that river,
right?
Something may happen.
I've had many people, they don't sweat. They're not sweating the way they should sweat. Hormones are out of balance.
Sure.
And then you're putting something on the body, you're making the body not sweat. You're disrupting those hormones. So now you can see why we're talking about this for the future health. Everybody that I work with individually with cancer, I'm trying to always make sure their lymphatic system is clean as possible, because we want that immune system to work the way it can, whatever. And that's the first step I say to them. Just say, we're not going to try to disrupt your hormonal balance, but we want to start with your deodorant. Maybe next step would be your toothpaste. You don't have to change everything overnight, but understand, and that's why we're having this conversation today, because people think, what are you talking about? I mean, I think everybody realizes that plastics are not so healthy for us, or these things all disrupt your endocrine system.
Or those microbeads that they're put in body washes. We're getting more exposed to some of these.
Yeah, parabens. I mean, it goes on and on. Phthalates, formaldehyde. I mean, think about the craziness is, but some of these puddings that you can get, these instant puddings.
Oh, he loves talking about pudding.
You're going to, mercury, glycol, lead, dioxin, these are all endocrine disruptors. And so when you're really getting back to the source, you don't have to worry about it. But when you look at your body care products, there's a lot of this stuff in there. And that's why we're talking about it. Because if you do it every day, that's the buildup. Yeah.
So for me, maybe you share it. For me, the ones that I pay attention to the most, number one is deodorant. I found one. It's expensive, but I value smelling good and also not blocking sweating. So yeah, when I'm stressed, I'm going to sweat more. But I have to maybe learn how to manage my stress versus just saying put on more antiperspirant or wear another shirt. Like there's these.
But what you just said is what's stress doing? The sympathetic nervous system is speeding up. It's going to make your heart rate go up, blood pressure go up.
It's trying to cool you down.
And you're going to perspire.
Yeah. So then face lotion, I use face lotion. I find I use that every day. I'm going to want one that's not got the parabens and the other harmful things. Shaving cream. Not using a shaving cream that's like a instant foam. The chemicals that create that are not something that I want to put on my skin. It dries it out and does a bunch of alcohols. And then shampoo and conditioner, and then soap. But when I go to a hotel, I don't get too caught up into it. When I, at some points, I usually travel with some of the stuff, but it's about the majority.
Correct.
So let's just say 70% of the time, am I putting pretty natural, transparent items on my body? And my skin's never been better. So those are some things that I do. What do you pay attention to?
Well, number one is deodorant. Toothpaste is a big deal because you put it in your mouth, and we know the mouth is the beginning of any type of digestion. And so you want to play around with your toothpaste, and there's lots of options out there. And then from there, I'm kind of going down the path I use oil. So I use almond oil or coconut oil as moisturizer. I could cook with it, or I can put it on my skin.
Please don't.
So those are the moisturizers I use, and then the same thing goes with shampoo. I have a shampoo that I like, and like you said, I don't get crazy with it when I travel. Sometimes I'll take it, and sometimes I don't, but I don't worry about it because I'm not doing it all the time.
Right.
And then that's kind of about it. And then from there, I look at cleaning products and hand soaps and things like that.
Laundry
and I get
detergent.
excited about it. You know, for Christmas, what do I give out to everybody?
Yeah, we still got some.
So for Christmas, whether they like it or not, their stocking is full of body care products.
Yeah, and again, this isn't where we start. I think it's a very interesting thing that we're getting more exposure to. There's many experts in the endocrine disruptor space that I think have very good information. If you think we're extreme, trust me, there's a scope and a spectrum where would even be something where you think that that's not possible that exists.
But these
just
are all,
having awareness.
These are all baby steps today.
Yeah.
And that's really the key is just create the awareness that the human body is incredible. And we try to, and to me, as time goes on, I would never think about that. We used to, when my hands got really dirty, we used lava, and then we used Irish Spring, or we used Prel as shampoos. And now you're realizing, wow, that stuff is right.
One of the things that I truly believe in, and this, and there's many reasons why it's common, but through COVID, as everyone was putting this hand sanitizers on, killing everything, I understand what we're fearful of, but we do have to kind of step back as we kill all bacteria because a hand sanitizer or antibiotic soap, like these kill all bacteria. That is not a good thing. And it's very controversial and there's politics involved. But if we just for a second, like Kristen says, use a little bit of common sense. My son Ez is 7. He's been in school in a COVID era. He learned bugs are bad. Okay, bad bugs are bad. But is bacteria a bug? I don't know his actual definition. But you need dirt.
You need to play in the dirt.
And when we just over sanitize and over cleanse, and you see it, I see it every day. More allergies, weaker immune systems, can't figure out why I don't feel a certain way. My gut's so out of balance. Like now I need to take hydrochloric acid because we got to step back and say, what are we putting on our body? What are we putting in our mouth? Because again, it comes back to your body's always talking to you. It is talking to us.
Right.
And the key is we just have to listen.
Yeah, and we need to start slowly. But again, from a body care standpoint, I would have everybody start with their deodorant, and then from there, just take one thing at a time and get excited about it. Because this, to me, I get excited when I have this, really cool soap that I could actually bite, or, I get excited about that. But we don't start with that. But these are things that really do add up over time.
Well, that's a new one. I don't bite my soap, but
I could. I'm not saying I bite it, but I could.
You could feel good about it. So as we leave you today, kind of talking about some areas that are maybe on the fringe, but if you have if your teeth or your breath or your eyes or your skin or your digestion or your sleep, you got to give yourself some space. Slow down. Try to listen. Do you have to know all the answers? Do you have to know all the steps? No, but when you have that self-awareness, I think that's where the beginning of the magic can happen. And we'll see you again next time.